Good morning, good morning, good morning, everybody. It is the first day of April, which does it mean that's April Fool's Day? I think it does, doesn't it? We used to have a thing in England. I don't know if it's everywhere else, but you had to, if you were going to fool someone or try to fool someone, you had to get them before 12 midday. I don't know if that applies everywhere or if that's just a rule in England or maybe it's just a rule in our area. I don't know. Maybe somebody told us that because they didn't want us to do April Fool all day long. But anyway, here we are. It's April Fool's Day. So before we begin our show, first of all, I'd like to say good morning to Gregor, who is, as always, excuse me, but I got a fiddle. I'm going to be fiddling all day today. Sorry about this, everyone. So let's say good morning to my spirit guide, excuse me, Grey Eagle, who is as always with me. And I'd like to say good morning to Chris, our facilitator. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Rosemary.
And good morning to all of you out there. I know that it's Saturday and I know that it's story time, but I hope you're going to forgive me because I'm not really up to telling stories, but you never know what's going to happen during the day. So I actually do not have a story as such to tell you, but I have a feeling that there will be one or two little stories going along as we go into the show this morning. So, Chris, do we have anybody there? Is there anybody there?
We have a number of people still logging in, and they're all saying their good mornings. From Annika, from Maggie, from Tracy, from Karen. They're all beginning to log in.
Okay. Well, we love that fact. So let me see. Why don't I tell you the story of my week? What have I done this week? Not a lot, I have to say, because my back has been out. Oh gosh, my back, my back. If only I weren't an old lady. If only I were, oh, wait a minute. Even when I was in my 20s, my back would go out. Because here's a story for you. Should we begin once? No, let's not. Let's not do the once upon a time. Not today. But here is a story for you because not a lot of people know this, but and to look at me, well, if you were here first thing in the morning, watch me get out of bed, you would know something was desperately wrong with me because, boy, oh boy, it takes me a good hour to be able to stand up straight. I hobble around like an old lady. But I've been doing that since I was in my 20s. Why, you ask? Why would you be doing that in your 20s? Well, many moons ago, when I was actually 20 years old, I had my first major surgery. And they, during that surgery, the doctors, the surgeon, I had a great surgeon. I was going to tell you what his name was then for a minute. Now it's slipped out of my head. That's the kind of day it is today, which is why I'm telling you stories are not my thing today. But anyway, let me think. Yes, so I was. I'm not going to tell you all the drama of what happened prior to the surgery, but here I was in the hospital, and they took me down for X-rays and things. And if any of you out there have ever had an internal X-ray, it is the worst thing, or well, maybe not. It is one of the worst things that could ever happen to you in a physical sense because they shove these wires up inside of you and they do all this nasty stuff and then they put dye in and they run the dye through the wires. No, we don't want that today, do we? No. But anyway, but doing that, they discovered that my kidney was I was born with a deformed kidney. Let's say it wasn't functioning; it had never really functioned. But what was happening as time went on, and as I say, now I'm 20 years old at this point. Now stones are trying to force their way through a tube that is completely narrowed down, so the stones can't get through, and because usually if you get stones, you usually, it can be painful, but they can pass through the urethra. I think that's how you say it, into the kidney. From the kidney, you flush, drink, you flush, and out. You can often flush the stones out. It's a painful process, but that's what you can do. But anyway, I've got a notification coming up on this computer. Can't see to save my life here, but anyway, we shall ignore it. Anyway, so they discovered all of this horrible stuff going on. So I had a fabulous surgeon who was very innovative for his time. How long ago? We're going back hundreds of years at least for this story. But anyway, and so he decided he was going to try and fix it. So he thought he'd put in a new tube and attach it to the kidney. Now, you have to remember that this was the first surgery of its kind. You all knew that I was famous, didn't you? But you didn't know that I was famous for a surgical procedure that had never been done before. Anyway, so he put in this, I say plastic tubing, who knows what it was made of really, but anyway, so he put me in a new urethra, and then he put me in another tube from the kidney, and then he turned the kidney so that whatever he did. But in order to get up in there, now I don't know, for those of you who are interested in surgeries, I like to watch, you see these things on YouTube, or you have these programs that do, they go in and they perform all of these amazing surgeries. And I like to watch those things. But sometimes, believe it or not, they'll cut somebody so wide around that they can literally get arms and elbows in there. So the patient comes out, when the patient wakes up, they feel battered and bruised and what have you. It's because somebody's been digging in there and somebody else has been digging in there. Anyway, they couldn't get in properly, so they decided, let's saw off this rib because it's in our way. So they sawed off the rib, and consequently, you can see all of this stuff that they were doing consequently weakened my back and weakened my spine tremendously. um, Unfortunately, the procedure didn't work, and it took so long that I got this nasty infection that was very rare. They couldn't trace it, and if they can't trace it, they can't cure it. So before it went to the other kidney, because your kidneys are joined at the back. Aren't you all enjoying this? Are you eating your breakfast with this gory tale that I'm telling you? Are you getting ready for Easter, making chocolate bunnies and things? You don't want to be cooking or eating, do you, while I'm telling you this gory tale? But it wasn't such a gory tale anyway. But still, they had already sliced me open more than halfway around my body, and then because it didn't work and they were worried about the infection getting to the second kidney, they decided they'd have to do it again, and they can't cut in the same spot. So that what they did was they cut alongside it, which means that I have this amazing scar. I always laugh when people talk to me about scars. Oh, I've got a scar and it's 2 inches long, and I'll tell you, I got a scar on my finger where I sliced right to the bone when I was cutting an avocado, and it's got to be an inch long. And I always smile to myself and think, shall I show them mine? Because mine is not only huge, but it's double. It's double the width. But anyway, there we have it. Consequently, since I was 20 years old, I've had problems with my back and had difficulty getting out of bed and straightening my back and all of that stuff. However, it hasn't stopped me. And there is a saying, I'm trying to think what it is. It's a quote, and I wish I could remember whose quote it was. Some of you might know what the quote is. Um, don't let your scars define you, let them refine you. So if you let your scars define you, you're going to, that's who you become. You become that damaged person. You become that person who, is just, you feel less yourself, you feel weakened yourself. All of a sudden you have this, I guess, sort of an invalid mind. And if you so don't let your scars define you, let them refine you. In other words, be refined, be understand, yes, all right, it's a scar, but that's not who you are. And it's certainly not going to make you who you want to be. And one of the greatest examples of someone who I met, who whose scars did not define her, they refined her. And I might have told this story before. You see, here I am, and it's Saturday morning. I'm telling a story, but you've heard this before. But nevertheless, once upon a time, why don't we do that? Once upon a time, so I met this lady. I was shopping. I was looking for a ball gown, and I was shopping, and I went into this very exclusive little boutique place, and it was in London, on one of the side streets of London, and you had to walk down 3 or 4 little steps to get down into this little shop, which was, oh, so many clothes. It was unbelievable. Um, and there was a lady in the shop standing on a very tall ladder uh, up in the ceiling with her back to me. And as I walked in the door, of course, there was a bell on the door, and she called out to me, don't I'll be there. I'll be with you in a moment. And I said, don't worry, I'm fine. And I'll just look around. And at some point, I was looking around. At some point, she turned to me and said, can I help you? Now, I might have said to you, she turned to me and smiled, but you wouldn't be able to tell if she was smiling or not because her face was totally ravaged. She'd obviously been the victim of serious burns. Her entire face, she had uh, eyes, eye sockets, but no eyelids, no eyebrows. She had no nose, just whatever that was. Her mouth was twisted somehow. Her skin was puckered and scarred beyond anything that you could possibly imagine. And the first thing somebody does when they're faced with something like that, and it's a natural and it's a human, it's a human reaction, is to absolutely recoil, because the one thing you're not expecting, and especially not in an exclusive um, ladies dress shop, is you're not expected to come face to face with this horror, this awful horror, and so the natural thing is to recoil. However, you know, I always say that when from being very very young, we are given things, we are given tools in one way or another. We either are given lessons, sometimes harsh, sometimes not harsh, but we're given lessons along our life's path in order to help us to deal with things that come along for us. So when I was faced with this lady, of course, my immediate thoughts were of the horror of the thing that I was seeing in front of me, but I had seen it before. I had grown up with it. So I did a paper round. When I was 11 years old, I was able to do this paper round. And the woman who used to fold the papers and bag the papers for us when we were kids, we'd sort of line up to get our paper route, and she'd hand us the papers. The woman who uh, did all of that, her name was Nancy. Um, she had been, during the war, she'd been on a jeep or a tank or something which had blown up, and literally she had no ears, she had sockets for eyes, she had her fingers were extremely scarred. She always wore gloves and long sleeves, so you couldn't see what the rest of her body was like, but you could get some idea. And her face was really just so badly scarred. Hair was gone, and she always wore a hat, but you could always see underneath the scarring, if the hat slipped, or you'd catch a glimpse of it. And but she became, to us, she was just Nancy. At first you notice these things, and then you get used to things like that, and we've all of us, whether we've seen it in person, whether we've experienced it personally, we've seen on TV. I remember there was an amazing woman with an amazing voice on one of these shows with Simon Cowell or someone, uh, and she had been in the war, and she'd lost bits of this and lots of that, and she was badly burned, and she stood on that stage and she sang like a bird. Um, don't let your scars define you; let them refine you. And so that's what we try to do. And let's move away just a minute from our physical scars to those emotional scars, which can often be so much more difficult, which create anger and bitterness and all of those things we don't want to be. And when you have emotional scars, it's the same rule. Please try. Do not let your scars define you, let them refine you. So, anyway, so coming back to the lady in the dress shop, I did not recoil. I didn't even flinch. I looked at her and I said, I'm looking for a dress. And she was puzzled for a moment by my reaction, but then accepted it and she helped me look for a dress. I ended up buying a dress in the shop and she was really great and she knew what she was doing. And for those moments, I might have been in that shop for an hour or two or something, but for those moments where we were talking, she was just uh, the owner of a dress shop, and I was just a person shopping for a ball gown, and that was that, and that was all it needed to be. And she did not let her scars define her. And in the same way, my scars are nothing compared to hers. But, I remember years and years ago somebody saying to me, no matter how bad you think things are, no matter how terrible life is to you, no matter what life dishes out to you, if you listen very, very, very carefully, no matter how much you've reached what you think is rock bottom, listen very carefully because there's always somebody knocking down below. In other words, there's always somebody else who is worse off than you and somebody else who is worse off than them. And I think if we take that attitude and we, grit our teeth, it's not easy sometimes to overcome scars, whether they're physical or emotional. I think if we really grit our teeth and work really, really hard at it, we can actually use the adversity to our benefit and to make the most of our life despite the encumbrances that we all have one way or another. Um, and I think that's the end of the story, the end, right? That's it. It wasn't really going to be a story time. And there you look at me. I've told you a story. So why did we start? Oh, yes, my back. So my back has been going in and out since I was 20 years old. As I get older, it's more of a struggle sometimes to sort of keep going. And, so, um, you know, I think I think that life has taught me that it's not about being brave. It's not about being a martyr. It's about how much do you want to make the most of the life that you have. What do you want to do with it? Who do you want to be? People say, "Oh, you're so brave," or people say, "Oh, you're so courageous," or people say, "Oh, that's amazing." How have you dealt with one kidney for all these years? I have to tell you, I've been fine. We've had our moments. We've had our little ups and downs. I've been in hospital 2 or 3 times, and here I am. Look, here I am. I'm sitting in my beautiful home, which there's no workmen today. There's no banging. There's no clattering. There's no dust. But come Monday, oh goodness, come Monday and Tuesday, well, the whole place is going to be ripped apart again. But that's okay too, because after that, when the dust settles, well, how nice will that be until the next time? Because there will be a next time as well. Anyway, off we go. We do not let adversity stop us. If we let adversity stop us, then we'd have been at a standstill for most of our lives. And for me, it's not about being brave. It's not about being courageous. It's about, I guess in a way, being selfish. How much do you want to love this life you have? How much do you want to live it to the best of your ability? how much do you want to grow in a spiritual sense? How much do you want to be grateful and thankful for the things that you have rather than the things that you don't have? And I think that, it's so easy for us to get in that situation where we go down that slippery slope, don't we? We go down that slippery slope, and oh, if we're not careful, we never come back up. We just keep going down that slippery slope of negativity. But I refuse to. The same way I refuse to not stand up straight in the morning. At some point, I'm going to stand up straight. You're going to see me standing up straight. It's determination to live your life the best way you possibly can, to make the most out of the life that you have. I've got fantastic, fantastic neighbours who are not here at the moment, but they asked me over a few days ago. They asked me over for a drink and something to eat, and I didn't really want to go, and I hobbled over there. I sat in a chair. I could hardly get back up. I hobbled back home, but I had a really great time in between. Do not let your adversity define you. Do not let your scars define you. Let them refine you. All right, I'm done talking. I'm assuming, Chris, we have people, unless everybody's left because I just kept talking, didn't I? Have I bored you all with my little stories? Anyway, uh, if we have anybody there, let's say good morning to everybody. And do we have any comments or questions going on?
Lorraine says you are a trooper, courageous. You are an inspiration for all of
Hey,
us that have
no. Well,
aches, pains, and worse. And yes, you try to live our best lives.
yeah. I mean, again, Lorena, thank you for your lovely words, but I don't think it's about being courageous. I think it's about just, oh, I hate being miserable. Just I hate being miserable. When I hear myself moaning and complaining, I could, easily shoot myself. It's just boring. So even when I'm on my own, especially actually when I'm on my own, you should hear some of the things I tell myself. Yeah. Get a grip, get off your butt, keep moving, go forward, all that sort of thing. It's boring being sick. It's boring. It's unhealthy being sick. Should I say it's unhealthy being sick? But it's not about being sick physically. It's about being sick in your mind, being being negative, which is so hard not to be when you're suffering. It's so hard not to be negative when you're in pain. But um, I've always felt, I'm really, really good at feeling sorry for myself. I'm the best at it. If I'm going to feel sorry for myself, there's nobody who does it better than me. But at some point, it becomes really boring. So it's not about being courageous, it's about being bored. At some point, you've got to get up. At some point, you've got to move forward. Or you just sit there and you get really, really bored, and then things get worse. And why would we do that to ourselves? We do it, don't we? But why would we do it? So I don't think it's about being courageous. For me, it's about being bored. I can't do with being bored. Okay, Chris.
Mark says it's about loving who you are regardless and living your best.
Oh, I like that, Mark. That's great. I love that. Yes.
Carolyn says you are feeling very refined, a great model of positive energy. Thank you for sharing about your physical scars. I think your example teaches we serve the world better by staying positive.
Well, thank you. I think we do too, and I think that I mean, my issues are small, teeny weeny compared to the issues of so many people out there. Um, it's being trying to stay positive and being inspirational is something that I think is important because you never know. You go to a supermarket and you smile at someone. You never know what kind of really rotten day they've had. You never know if you're the first person to smile at them in a week or a month or something. You don't know how lonely those people are. So just going out and about and being positive and smiling and talking to people and just treating people as if they matter. I think we all inspire. When we do that, we all inspire.
Maggie says, then there are those who are using sickness or scars for attention. Mom would say, you know what the hypochondriac put on his gravestone. Told you I was sick.
Oh, well, my mother. Here's another little story for you all. My mother, um, my parents each had an armchair on either side of the fireplace, and then there was a sofa, and our kids would sit. There were, there were six of us. There were my two brothers. By the time we got to be about five or six or something, my brothers had left and gone into the army, so there were only then four of us girls. But four girls sitting on a sofa made for three is not such an easy task. So sometimes we sat on the floor, sometimes we sat on a dining chair or what have you. But my parents each had a nice big comfy armchair, one on either side of the fire. And on my mother's side, next to her armchair, was a bookcase, lots of different books. And the book that she would read most of all would be the medical book, the medical journal that she had, and she would love to look through it, and then and then decide which ailment she had over the next 3 or 4 days. And I can remember she was always at the doctor's surgery. She worked really hard. My mother. She'd finished work at 6 and raced to the surgery, and the surgery would close at let's say 6:30 or something. It's a long time ago, so it's hard to remember. But she'd raced to the doctor's surgery, and one time she came home and she was so mad, she was spitting mad, literally spitting, and she was really furious because the the the, the, the doctor's surgery that she used to go to, it was a big old house, a big old sort of early 1900s house, beautiful house with a giant driveway. So the head, the main doctor who was there, there were three or four doctors who worked from there, but the one who was the main doctor who my mother always used to go to, she oh, wait a minute. Here we go. You can see me, can't you? But I can't see you. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Here we go. Here we go.
We can see you fine.
I know, but I can't see. Why? Oh, can you see me now?
Yes.
No, no. I've come out of something here. Wait a minute. I don't know what I'm doing. What am I doing? Oh, there we go. Right, let's go back here. Where's the camera? Can't see the camera. That little Adobe thing keeps coming up and blocking everything out. No, I don't know how to get back to you.
Well, you're with us. We
All
see
right.
everything you're doing.
Okay. All right. Then. All right. I'm just going to keep going. Then. Let me just put my glasses on and see if I can see what I'm doing. So anyway, the doctor used to sit in her living room, which was at the front of the house, so she could see anyone and everyone coming down the driveway. Where is that little arrow gone? Put my glasses on and I can't see anything. And there. And she obviously must have seen my mother coming up the driveway. By the time my mother got to the door, they'd locked the surgery door. My mother banged and banged and banged on the surgery door, and she knew there were patients inside, and she knew the doctors were inside, but they wouldn't let her in because the doctor had obviously had enough of her. Because my mother was a serious, devoted hypochondriac. There was always something wrong with her. How sad is that? So, anyway, so she lived a negative life, which is very sad for anyone who does that. So, keep going, Chris.
All right. Rhonda says it's always good to listen to you, Rosemary. Lorraine says it takes courage to go through what we have to. And yes, we have to push ourselves. Maggie says, I'm not one to let others know what's going on with me. And when they know, they say, I would never have known it.
Yeah.
Annika's got a question. I always
Yes.
feel that when you accept a sickness, you become the sickness. How do you feel about that?
Oh, I don't think that's necessarily true. I think it depends on the person. I think if you accept what's going on with you, you can deal with it better. If you accept what's going on with you and you can know the ins and outs of something that's going on with you, you know better how to fight it. You know better how to, I mean, I know what's going on with my back, for instance, so I know exactly how to get out of bed in the morning. It is not pretty sight because you have to roll this way and then you have to put your legs out that way. So I think if you know what's going on with you, I think if you're a positive person, I think it helps tremendously. But if you're a person who thinks negatively or you're easily affected, it can, yes, it you can be cut. You can sort of, in the nicest way, I will use this term, you can wallow in it, and all of a sudden, then you become worse and worse. I mean, truthfully, I could have lived the rest of my life being 20 years old, and then I was 21 when I had the second surgery. I mean, I've had all those lives in between, and I've known people who have been sick, some worse than me, and some not. Uh, as bad as me, but I've known people who have used that as a crutch. They've used it to sort of manipulate people into doing what they want them to do. I've known people who have, really used uh, what's happening to them in a way to get their own way about things or in negative ways. um, but I've also known people more people, thank goodness, I've known people who know what's going on with them. They embrace it and do something about it. Don't let your scars, that means illness, sickness, emotional, whatever it is, don't let your scars define you. Don't become them. Let them refine you, let them help you to think beyond and to refine your thinking and to deal with things in a way that is positive. It depends a lot on the person. It depends on the energy of the person too. I mean, it's my mother is definitely um, a fire sign and a retrospective soul. And for me, as an earth sign and a warrior soul, that's got to be the worst. That's got to be the worst type of energy because we don't we never do this. We always do this. Um, but a retrospective soul is a person who does tend to look on the negative because that's the kind of energy that they're created from. But once knowing it, I have our good friend Jeff, who is definitely a fire sign, definitely a retrospective soul. I don't know if he's on this morning, but he does sometimes come on, and he knows what he is. So in other words, he's embraced what he is and he works. And when he falls into that pattern of negativity, he knows exactly what he's doing and he's able to pull himself out of it. So I think that knowing who you are, what you are, is very helpful. It can be very helpful to you.
Barb says, may we all do healing for Rosemary and Chris.
Well, I thank you for that thought. I'm not speaking for Chris, and I think Chris sounds much better now anyway. But I thank you for saying that, and I appreciate it. But um, it's not that I don't need it. I get it every single day. I get it in every way from so many people every day. And I would love if you could pass it on. So instead of worrying about me and thinking about giving me energy, which I do really appreciate, maybe you could sort of focus on the local children's hospital in your area. Maybe you could focus on the burns unit there. There are lots of people who need your energy, lots of people who need that love that you are, giving so freely. But it's not that I'm less deserving than others. It's that I got plenty. So if you could focus on those who perhaps need it more, that would be brilliant. But thank you, thank you, thank you for that. Chris, next question, please.
Gary says, I'm amazed how your mind shifts into overdrive when needed. Attitude is everything.
Well, is this our Gary,
Yes.
who has his own scars? I'm still waiting, by the way, just waiting to hear the results of things. But hey, who am I? Just keep me waiting. Just keep me waiting. Me and also, let's give you a hard time for this. When are you coming to Florida? I mean, come on, really. Anyway, aside from all of that, um, Gary is someone who has had. I won't. I promise, I'm not telling all of your secrets, Gary, but has had way worse scars than mine. I think physically, um, and yes, look what he just said. You know, we've got to be positive. We've got to stay positive, and it's people like Gary who help me or remind me of how, you know, how important it is to embrace who you are, embrace what happened to you, and then use it in a positive way to inspire others. You know, I think that's the important thing.
Carolyn says being positive attracts more positive energy, and same for being negative, which will attract more negative energy.
Absolutely. Yes, that's exactly right. You know, every little tiny thought that we have goes out into the universe. It gathers like thoughts on its way towards where you sent that thought. Okay, if it's a positive thought, by the time and then it course it's your energy. It's always coming back to you. So out it goes, reaches the person you're sending it out to, and then comes boomerangs right back to you. If it's positive energy, you're not only giving other people your healing and your positive energy. You know, it's going to return to you tenfold, which is, you know, why I always say, you know, the more you give, the more you get. But likewise, negativity. If you're sending out negative thoughts, be careful because they're coming bouncing right back at you. So, you know, it's always important to think positively.
Gary. Oh, Gary. Gary says the brain scan that they did showed nothing.
I have to tell you, he is one of the funniest people I've ever met. Uh, all right. Well, that doesn't surprise me, Gary, because I knew you had no brain at all. So, hey, you're not telling me anything new. Keep going, Chris, before we get really, really insulting.
Mark says, I have to agree with you, Rosemary. I could say, the heck with it all. Every one of us has health issues. And for the lucky ones who don't, they are blessed. I feel blessed that I woke up this morning. And yeah, I have a lot of bodily aches. Who doesn't? It's about attitude. You got to give a little, live a little. And when your poor heart breaks a little, that's the story. That's the glory of love.
Now, whose song is that? That's the story of love. I can't remember who sang it, but thank you very much for those words. Okay, Chris.
At the moment, I am out of chats.
Oh, you know what that means then, don't you? You know, I tell everyone you don't participate, that's the end of it. Jiggling about here with this cushion. So, you know, I'm going to give it a couple more minutes, and if there are nothing, if there's nothing coming back, I'm going to quit, and then I'm going to do some stretches, and then what do I have to do? Yes, well, yes, because we're having workmen coming in on Monday. They'll be here Monday and Tuesday, possibly Wednesday. The dust will be flying everywhere. It'll be worth it when they're gone, won't it? I mean, these things, you know, unfortunately take time. Still, the hurricane, still the fingers, those long fingers of the hurricane still protrude out there. I think, you know, it's so easy. We see things on the news, see things that have happened, and because we're human, we tend to think once it's all blown over, or seems to be blown over, that that's the end of it. We forget the aftermath. Every action we take, every one of us, every single action we take, um, is like throwing a pebble in a pond. And we see the ripples of the pebble. We can see the ripples going out. And so we can see that that one little pebble has caused an effect. Our actions cause an effect, they ripple out. What we don't see, and what we often don't realize and we forget, is that when that pebble hits the water, the ripples go out on the surface, but as the pebble's going down, it's affecting the water underneath. The ripples are going down deep underneath, and those are the ripples that we don't necessarily see. Those are the ripples that are affecting that pond, let's say, that we don't even realize the effect, the ripple effect that that pebble has. And it's like every action we take, we don't realize. We see the effect on the surface, but we don't necessarily realize the deeper effect that it has on people, and how easily we can scar people, or how easily we can heal people with a kind word, with a smile, and so on. And I think it's so, and it's the same with nature. Every action, the wind blows really strong. I'm looking outside. My neighbor across the street has a flag flying at half mast, and we're remembering the awful shootings that happened. Um, we all have our opinions on these things, but the ripple effect, it's old news. It's a few days old, but it's old news for us. But it's not old news for the families, and it's not old news for the school, and it's not old news for the kids who were present and the teachers who were present, not being necessarily affected physically by it, but certainly emotionally. And we tend to forget the ripple effect that people's actions have. And I think it's important for us to know and to understand that every action we take, which we can control our own actions. Every action we take, whether it's a smile or a nod, or whether it's a huff and a puff, or whether it's being mean to someone, or whether it's ignoring someone, or whether it's, somebody slammed the door in my face in the store the other day. It was like, there I am holding the door, and the next thing it slams right back at me because somebody just walked through, hit the door on the way, and every action has its effect, and we see the effect on the surface, but we don't necessarily see, or are not even aware of, the deeper ripple effect that happens, and how easily we can really deeply affect someone with our actions, for good or for bad. So I think it's very important that every day when we wake up in the morning, we try to, say to ourselves, uh, I, I want my actions to be good ones today. I want to be positive today. Um, Talking of actions, and now I'm going to boast because, well, you're not interacting with me, so I'm just talking here. But when I'm done talking, when I'm telling you this, if nobody's on that chat, that's it, we're done. But I do have some fabulous news, because my grandson last Saturday went for his, whatever I forget now what it's called, but you know, they kids do different grades. We're back to music. You all know that he played at Carnegie Hall. You all know that he got a first. See, I'm boasting and bragging now. Well, you weren't interacting with me, so I'm going to boast and brag as much as I ought to, because he's my grandson after all. But anyway, then he sort of, they piano is different grades. It's not based on age. It's based on talent, and so he did his tests, and then they had to wait a few days for the results. And my daughter called me yesterday, and she said, I've had the results back. Well, I already knew the results because I cheated. Yes, I did. I did, my way. And so I was expecting the best. Yes, I cheated. I do sometimes. But then when she said, I'm going to wait for Reese to come home. So when he came home, they called me, and Reese said, he looked at me, he was very solemn. He said, Mosey, I didn't do what I did last year. And I said, I know, darling. I think you did better, didn't you? And he grinned and he said he got 99% out of 100, which is pretty good, right? Don't you think? It's pretty good. I'm boasting about my grandson. Actions, my interacting with him, his interacting with me, the ripple effect is not just on the surface. I'm not just looking at his smile. I have to look deeper. We all have to look deeper with our actions and see how our actions and our words affect other people. Uh, we want them to be effective in a good way, not a negative way. Anybody Anybody there, Chris? I mean, are we getting any responses, or are we going to say goodbye? I can sing the goodbye song as well. Do you know that
We
song?
have some, Rosemary.
We do. Oh, I was going to sing. Never mind. Keep going, Chris. I'm glad we've got some. Keep going.
Rhonda says, I have a question about the pendulum. Does it have to have a pointed tip?
No, it doesn't have to have a pointed tip. Um, it's it's easier, I think, to use it to see what's going on with it if it's narrower at the base of where you're using it than the top. But no, it doesn't have to have a pointed tip. It just has to be something that you love and is yours and works for you. I'm glad that we're getting these pendulum questions. I'd love to hear how everybody's getting on with the pendulum. I'd also love to hear, did anybody, oh gosh, has anybody uh, gone aura spotting yet? How about that?
Lorraine says, when I'm feeling low or in a health issue, I think of my cousin's wife who is battling cancer, and still she remains the most optimistic person I know, finding joy as she fights her sickness.
Oh, fabulous. I love to hear stories like that.
Let's see. Mark said that you were in a dream the other night with him.
All right.
Um, you'd had your hand on his shoulder, talking about his upcoming road trip. He was sharing that his 15-year-old fur son was going to join him, and you asked, where will I be heading? I said, well, I was unsure if I would get to Florida from South Carolina, and I was heading to Savannah. You said, keep in touch. It was very surreal.
All right. Good. Good. Well, do it slow. Take your time. Enjoy it. See the sights. I mean, I've actually done that trip from Florida. It's a great trip. You can see all sorts of things. So enjoy yourself, but take your time and do it slowly. It's it. What do they say about it? It's not the journey. It's when you're climbing a mountain. It's not about reaching the top. It's about the experiences that you have on the mountain as you climb, the things that you see. Don't be in too much of a hurry that you miss the flowers along the way. Keep going, Chris.
Lorraine says every one of us has the capability to give encouragement and joy to others.
That's
Eric,
so true.
Eric says your messages are so timely. I'm in escrow now for my home.
Ooh, you're getting excited, my lovely.
Karen says, what do you do to yourself? No, what you do to yourself, you do to another. What you do to another, you do to yourself.
Well, yes, well, as we just talked about, your actions cause reactions. So, when we think about the pebble, just think about that pebble. We can always see what happens on the surface, can't we? Because the pebble, the water ripples, but we can't ever see what goes deep inside. So we have to make sure, if we can possibly, we have to make sure that our words, our deeds, our every action has a positive ripple effect rather than a negative ripple effect.
There are a number of congratulations for Reese from Eric. Happy for
Yeah.
Reese's news. Julia, wow, congratulations to Reese. That is wonderful. Annika, I love it when you talk about your grandson. Your love and pride lights up your face.
Yes, well, I'm a bit of a, what am I? I'm an indulgent. I indulge myself. I indulge him too, but I indulge myself because he brings me so much joy that, sometimes I sit here by myself and I've got this thing of photos that I can put on my TV, and I can see him from when he was a baby to now. He's 10 years old. Can you believe it's 10 years old since my grandson was born? But I look at the photos and totally indulge myself. It's almost it's better than eating chocolate, I think. Let me think. Yes, it is. Of course, it is. It's much better than eating chocolate. Okay, sorry, I'm wriggling. Anything else, Chris, before we close? Because I'm not quite sure how much longer I'm going to be able to sit here.
Yeah, Eric says the pendulum's working better and better, but Teresa says, I'm not a big fan of the pendulum.
Oh, okay. Did she say why?
No.
Okay, well, it's an exercise. It's a way of helping you to raise excuse me, to raise your level of consciousness. It's one more way of helping you to become more aware and more in tune. And it's not about what the pendulum tells you so much as it's about you tuning into your soul, tuning into your own self, raising your level of consciousness to the point where you become much more aware of things going on. So I'm not quite sure why you wouldn't want to do that, but if you don't like it, don't do it.
Mark thinks you should end the show with your song,
Which song would that be?
your goodbye song.
Goodbye, goodbye. There were two comedians who used to sing this. Wipe the tear, baby dear, from my eye. That's it. I'm done. There you are, Mark. All right, that's it, I think, for today. So thank you for joining me, everyone. It seems like it's such a short show. Yes, a short show. Do you know how hard that is to say, especially the second time? Uh, Thank you all for joining me. I hope you enjoyed yourselves and the story that wasn't really a story, but it turned out to be a story, right? So I hope you enjoyed all of that. I hope you've been inspired today by what we've had to say. We will be back next Thursday, I think, thinking about this. Yes, we will be back next Thursday. We'll be talking about auras again. And remember, if you saw last week's show, you'll know exactly what we're going to be doing. I'm going to be helping you to paint your aura. So all of this talk about staying positive and being positive, painting your aura will definitely help you to do that. Go aura spotting this weekend. Why don't you all just try it out? You never know what you might see when you become or endeavor to become more aware of your own soul, more aware of your spirit, more aware of people around you, more aware of their souls. You never know what you're going to encounter. So enjoy yourselves this weekend. Thank you for joining me. Thank you, Chris, for doing such a great job. And last but no means least, as I always say, I'd like to say thank you to Greg Eagle, who is definitely listening. Oh gosh, put his hand on my back, just right there. You see, you don't need to send me healing. I've got the best right here. Just saying. So until I see you again, please, 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 everyone, have a very blessed rest of the weekend. Have a very blessed rest of the day, should I say, and have a very blessed weekend. Bye bye, everybody.